So over the years, we have seen one of the most famous superheroes become stronger, more powerful, and seemingly flawless. He's faster than a speeding bullet. He's more powerful than a locomotive. And he is able to leap a building in a single bound. It's Superman. Now, he's been around since 1938, and he's been a part of all kinds of media, comics, he's been a part of movies, TV shows, and for a while, it seemed like nothing could stop Superman, not even kryptonite. Now, audiences seem to want this version of Superman, this stoic, invincible, strong, increasingly silent Superman. But the downside of that is it becomes less and less relatable. How many times can you watch someone bench press an entire skyscraper? I mean, at one point in Superman 3, he reversed the rotation of the Earth and then turned back time. I mean, how many times can you watch that and be like, wow, he's really powerful? How much more powerful can he get? In one of the more recent movies in Justice League, Superman was able to defeat the final bad guy with just 3 punches. So the newer Superman film has received some criticism for making him appear weaker. But I noticed something. He still flies around. He still saves people. He's still able to lift giant skyscrapers, but he also struggles. He gets beaten up a little bit. But I think what stood out most to me was a monologue he shares with Lex Luthor. Now, this isn't going to be a spoiler, so don't worry if you haven't seen the movie yet, but we're going to show a clip of that monologue.
Alien! That is where you've always been wrong about me, Lex. I'm as human as anyone. I love, I get scared, I wake up every morning, and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other, and I try to make the best choices I can. I screw up all the time. But that is being human. And that's my greatest strength. And someday, I hope, for the sake of the world, you understand that it's yours too.
So Superman says that his greatest strength is his humanity. And in his battle with this villain, his deepest hope is that this messy, complicated humanity, which gives him strength, will also be embraced by Lex Luthor for the sake of all people. See, Superman's hope was not to beat up the bad guy and save the day. It was for the bad guy to become more human. And in that, he would be able to offer more to humanity. This reminds me of something Fred Rogers once said when defending PBS in front of a Senate committee. When explaining the heart of his programming, he said, "It is very dramatic when 2 people come together to work something out. It's easy to take a gun and annihilate your opposition, but what is really exciting to me is to see people with differing views come together and finally respect one another." So I promise that today's sermon is not just a movie review about the new Superman, or it's not a love letter to Fred Rogers. But I can only imagine if I was doing a children's message, there would be a hand going up saying, well, what does Superman have to do with the Bible? So let's turn to Moses, a figure many of us know well. See, we've seen him in Scripture. We've heard about him in the children's message. Some of us may have seen the Prince of Egypt if you have kids. You may have seen Charlton Heston's The 10 Commandments. And often we see Moses portrayed as a confident, charismatic leader of Israel. So just think of Heston's booming voice declaring before Pharaoh, "Let my people go," towering in strength and authority. But like Superman, Moses, I think, has become too monolithic in our imaginations. A no-nonsense leader who boldly confronts Pharaoh and leads Israel towards the promised land. Yet, when we take a closer look at the text, I think we'll see a more human, more complex Moses. So if we were to label Moses, some of the labels we might give him are a killer, because he does kill an Egyptian while trying to defend an Israelite, and this forced him to flee Egypt. Another label we might give him, or he actually gave himself, was a nobody. So after killing the Egyptian, Moses ran with no intention of ever returning. And even when God called out to him from a burning bush to go and to liberate the Israelites, Moses says, "But God, I am a nobody." And then God showed him 2 miracles, promising Moses that God would be with him in this good work. Moses still says, "No, Lord, don't send me." We might call Moses a stutterer. Moses admits himself that he's not a good speaker, he's slow, he's hesitant. Now, many scholars debate if this meant that he stammered, or if he stuttered, or if he just wasn't good at public speaking. But this was such an obstacle that Aaron, his brother, ended up being a mouthpiece for him. We might call Moses an advocate, that despite his hesitations, he repeatedly confronted Pharaoh and advocated for the release, the freedom of his people. We could absolutely call Moses brave. I mean, he entered Pharaoh's palace after killing an Egyptian. He parted the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army close behind him. And he confronted his own people after receiving the 10 Commandments and told them to break apart the golden calf. But the label that I would give Moses that we're going to focus on today is homeless. Because for 1/3 of his life, Moses wandered the wilderness with no permanent home, leading a nomadic people towards a promised land that he himself would never enter. In our text today, Psalm 90 is a prayer of Moses written during his wandering in the wilderness. It's a plea for God's compassion, for gladness in the midst of affliction, for God's presence to sustain a people with no land, no nation, and no home. Being without a home is central to the story of Israel. Enslaved in Egypt, exiled by Babylon, and wandering in the desert. So what does it mean to be homeless? Do we know anyone who is homeless? Does homelessness look the same in every case? Is it a crime? These are the questions that we must grapple with. Because you see, in the past 2 years since I've been here, there have been people experiencing homeless showing up even here at the church. Now, some have stayed for a while, and we've been able to help them. And others just stayed for a night to take shelter from a storm. Because you see, one evening, I was putting away some AV equipment after a youth movie night, and I was walking in through the back entrance, because there's no steps, and I had a giant cart filled with a PA system. And it was a little dark out, so I was pushing this cart, and all of a sudden, in the darkness, I saw a shuffling, and I jumped back. And there was someone who was laying down in front of the entrance, and he was tremendously apologetic. He was like, "I'm so sorry." And I saw the thunderstorm coming in the distance. He's like, "The thunderstorm's coming, and I'm just trying to stay dry." So he started gathering his things and left. And I was like, "It's okay, you can stay dry. Do you need water? Do you need food?" And then I said, "There's Love Inc. across the street. They're a great place to check in the morning." You see, homelessness isn't just an abstract issue. It's here, and it's real. I first encountered this reality back in 2004 during college when some friends and I believed that we could fix homelessness in Harrisburg. And in doing that, we made a bunch of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, grabbed a bunch of bottles of water, and thought that would be enough. So we got all those bags together. We walked on down to 2nd Street where the bus stop was. And that was back when the benches didn't have armrests, so people could lay down on the benches. That was back when after 9 o'clock, the homeless community was able to stay there. And they even told me that the Hilton, the hotel right there by the bus stop, would let them use the restrooms. So we went there, sandwiches in hand, and we start trying to pass them out. And we went to the first person, and they said, "No, I'm okay." And then We found out how naive we were, how uninformed we were, because after a while, after only a couple of people took our care packages, one man explained to us that there is a feeding program or a soup kitchen offered every night of the week except for Tuesdays. And it wasn't Tuesday. So we kept going, but on Tuesday nights. And in doing this, we realized the real gift that we could give wasn't sandwiches, but it was conversation. It was asking their names. It was being present. You see, again and again, many of the people, as we were talking to them, many of them shared their faith. They had a confidence that God was with them. And even in their hardship, they believed that good times were ahead and that they knew that they weren't alone. And in hearing this, it sounded like the echoes of Moses' prayer. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, so that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. See, Harrisburg, as of 2018, which is when I last did a deep dive into the numbers, had about 580 recorded homeless people. Now, that number has only grown since then. And even though there are shelters, those shelters open at 7 p.m. and they close at 7 a.m. So for those who go to those shelters, they must bring all of their belongings and then stay there if they're able to get in, and then at 7 a.m. bring all of their belongings with them out. Now, there are a couple exceptions to this. There are 2 tiny home communities, one of which this church has funded a tiny home, and that's Veterans Village. They have 15 tiny homes. There's another tiny home community called Eden Village, and they have roughly under 40 tiny homes. So while this is a great start, the majority of the homeless still live in this transient state, moving with all of their belongings unless they find space to set up a tent. And also, very few shelters allow for an entire family to stay together. So when a person is afflicted with homelessness, they have to make a couple choices. Should they wait in line at a shelter in the hopes that there will be room for them so they can benefit from the safety and security of a shelter? If there is not room, do they check at another shelter? Now, if there's a family unit, do they split up for the night where the men go to one shelter and the women and children go to another shelter? Or do they see if they can get into Family Promises program? They have to figure out, is it worth bringing all of their belongings to a shelter that might be open, only to have to pick up and leave at 7 o'clock in the morning? Then they can figure out if they should find some public space where it may or may not be legal for them to set up a tent. Or they could go to the newly designated encampment where there are more services, there's more opportunities, but they can't quite figure out how to cook food yet. And it's not quite as convenient with walking for possible jobs or to be connected to the communities that they're used to being connected to. So that's just figuring out where to lay their heads. Then if they want to start making a plan to get out of homelessness, they have to figure out things like where to shower, how to keep a set of clean clothes ready for an interview, where to charge their phone so they can call and inquire about a job, or how to get a job with employment gaps, with no permanent address, or no transportation. So this isn't just a Harrisburg issue. This happens all over. So now, a quick side note. I started thinking, pondering, praying about this sermon early in July, so you can imagine my surprise when the homeless community in D.C. made national news. Now, this community is close to my heart because I've led a couple trips to D.C. with youth. See, we used to stay at this service hostel called the Pilgrimage. And what this was a program where we got to go to warehouses where they did food distribution, and we did some warehouse work. And then the other leg of this was we used to go to soup kitchens. And I love this program because at the soup kitchen, half of us would prepare the food and serve the food, but the other half would sit down and eat with all who entered. So what was great about this program was the youth that I brought there got to sit, eat, and have conversations with everybody at the soup kitchen. At first, they were concerned. They were scared. They had reservations. They were like, I'm afraid, I was told that I shouldn't speak to people who are homeless, or I'm worried about my own safety. These were all valid. So we talked through those. But after a couple days, all of them started to make this realization that they were actually people. And not only were they people, they were children of God. And they wanted to be known. They wanted to be loved. They wanted security. They wanted full stomachs. And they wanted to be treated with dignity, just like everyone else. Now, in complete transparency, there were some awkward conversations. And there absolutely were some people who just didn't want to talk to us. But for the most part, most of them did open up to us. They shared their stories with us. And in doing so, we were all better for it. And in some of their stories, they did share their faith with us, that God was watching over them, that they believed in the midst of their hardship that they were still loved by God, and that goodness, and that they were still going to have better times ahead. So, in hearing all of this once again, I heard the echoes of Moses' prayer. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, so that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. You see, it's part of our story as God's people to be without a home, to wander in the wilderness, to be unsure where or how long you can pitch a tent. Moses, who was brave, strong, and faithful, while he was all those things, he was still homeless. And he died before ever being able to enter the promised land. So yet, we trust that Moses is finally with God. Let us not wait until heaven to experience God's goodness. Instead, as a church, let's bring heaven to earth, welcoming the stranger, loving the least of these, and helping all God's children to know what it means to be home. May we seek to know all of God's children, learning about the awesome and divine nature that all of them have dwelling inside of them. Let us be there to remind them of their worth through love and through action. And as Superman reminded us, it's not about superpowers or gifts. Those aren't the things that give us value. It's our humanity, which was given to us by God, where beauty can come from brokenness. Amen.